The human brain, being the finely tuned machine that it is, requires that all portions of it be capable and running for standard human behavior to even be possible. If you are to alter even just a few hormones of the brain, for instance, this could have a plethora of cascading consequences, completely altering the outcome, leading to what we might call abnormal behavior. To this end, what if we created an EMP pulse that completely shuts down, I guess, the human brain with varying levels of reactivation? Supposed to not be possible, but apparently is possible. Well, then you get today's episode. In the events of We Bury the Dead, which is going to get this whole thing demonetized, a countermeasure would be allegedly inadvertently detonated near Tasmania. As a result, anything on the island would be immediately dropped as their brains were switched off. Even cats. Dr. Mambo, no! Well, actually, he's orange, so he would probably survive this. As volunteers are sent in, a woman named Ava with Amy characteristics would search for her soon-to-be estranged ex-husband in an effort to, clean up their apparently collective mess, as she calls it, which we're all gonna have a good laugh about that later. However, what she finds on the island isn't just a bunch of meat suits taking a dirt nap. So, what exactly is going on? Well, we're going to figure that out today. We kick off our story with The Pursuit of Happiness playing, but you can't hear it because copyright would absolutely nuke this episode from orbit. The Wilsons are being rode down by a couple as they check each other's teeth for not human flesh. As a phone call goes out asking if he's okay, it appears to be that this woman is actually making that call as We Bury the Dead flashes on screen. A nuke now goes off, annihilating everyone as they watch and drop. Well, nuke adjacent, I guess. Luckily for the rest of the planet, it was just Tasmania. But unfortunately for the Tasmanians, it was Tasmania, as you might have guessed from my previous statement. I mean, that absolutely sucks for the Aussies also, but I guess just add to the growing list of things trying to take you out on that continent. Next, you'll tell me they're giant mutant spiders or some sort of marsupial that has 95% of its population infected with herpes or something. So as a woman wakes up asking if she was snoring, breath has got to be absolutely rank. This is too close of an area to be doing that. The other woman then lies, saying, "You didn't make a peep." Her name is Ava, and she's used to lying. This is me writing the next day, so I actually know her name now. So now we actually get a really awesome breakdown of what did transpire. This nuke wasn't a nuke at all. While obviously a blast did happen, what it actually did was blast out an electromagnetic pulse that ended up shutting down everyone's brain on the island, and as a result, they would all enter immediate cardiac arrest. Essentially, consciousness on, a flash, and then consciousness off, which is exactly how a nuke works, but less radiation. And this is also designed as a weapon to do so. Not really sure why it blew up there, but an interesting idea, but very doubtful the human nervous system would actually shut down completely because this is not the way it actually works. We'll kind of get into that heavily in the science section because I'm already quite intrigued. Volunteers are being brought up in order to help mitigate the issue of cleanup. Also, people just straight up looking for family members and what happened in the first place are pretty much flooding the area. Some are upset as Ava then asks about going down south, as she's basically just told sort of bluntly, "You can't go down there, it's still burning." Amazing. The government makes a mistake. They ask for volunteers. Volunteers show up. They are treated as annoyances, and this is basically if the DMV handled a disaster crisis that was caused by the DMV. Granted, the DMV letting most of the drivers out on the road currently is a disaster crisis, but hey, armor up the 3rd Gen 4Runner and just press on, I guess. So the woman then asks her, well, who was down there? She says it was her husband. Best part is you have legs and can just walk down there, as then one guy gets some information finally to the rest of the crowd. The alleged deceased are showing unusual activity, and if they start to do that, the military will be there to put them down with the dignity that they allegedly deserve. So I guess it depends on the level of damage here, but yeah, man, I mean, if they're getting up and walking around, maybe just throw a net on them or something. Also, does everyone get their own personal escort? The answer is no. No, they don't. And with these people acting a bit strange, I don't know, man. Give them something to defend themselves with, right? So the other soldiers then says the ones who do come back online are docile and slow moving. So you have nothing to fear. This is totally a lie. And the reality is, didn't the government just lie about this whole thing? So I'm pretty sure they're not going to be docile and slow moving. Hopping a bus and heading to clean up the sites, a guy calls over to a soldier and asks how many of them are coming back online. He's told that if he just sees one, pop his flare and they will be there to help. Entering the area with burnt out homes and industrial equipment, people are let out of the bus as they begin clearing homes. Finding some shoes, the Smith family likely didn't fare very well, and as they search, all the typical things are there. Family portraits, random stuff, food on the table, bloodthirsty reanimated. Well, actually, no. Looking outside, the hose is running and mom is down for the count with the rest of the family. Pulling the absolutely still living but taking a nap family out front, you two mods, no need to worry, I've already cleared this. We're good to go. Everyone is exposed to the Tasmania heat as the shaved hair sides then walks off. Not really sure what I was going with there. I know her haircut. I've seen it before. Anyways, across the road, one guy then bursts out of the room, throwing up, as another then smokes a cigarette. Definitely going to need therapy after all this is said and done. Checking the old man, he's not coming back at all. Ava, whose name I only just learned at this point when I wrote it, just asked why some come back versus others who don't. And that is an excellent question. Brainstem resiliency may be something which we will have to examine in the science portion of this, but we'll kind of get there. So now it's just a montage of searching buildings and locating people. Pets were also on the list of living things. Man, the military and government at large would have so many lawsuits on their hand over this. It would go crazy style. Of course, there'd probably be a crazy amount of cover-up too. But as Ava then pulls one woman out, and long hair nopes out for the day, she looks up and sees that people who lived there were in fact married. Bummer, bro, of course. Inquiring minds wish to know where was the husband. Actually, nowhere. I thought for sure this was going to be a thing where like he appears and, ooh, it's scary, but as it turns out, no. It just never happens. So you may be asking yourself, Roanoke, where are the bloodthirsty infected? I too am wondering that. So as they get in line for some food, one woman then discusses why they can't just see if their brains fully come back online rather than just blowing their sheaths smooth off. Actually, it's smooth off with a V. That's a very good question, and I don't think anybody really considered that because what you're seeing is possibly areas of the brain coming back online, which means it wasn't starved of oxygen? Possibly. The cerebrum itself, essentially where the humanity of our brain is located, is very, very sensitive, whereas the more lizard portion brains, which is just the old way of saying like the lower areas of the brain, that's much more resilient. So possibly the more resilient areas were able to survive the cardiac arrest as then the heart restarted, but we'll get into all of that, trust me. So another woman then starts yelling, he's going to wake up as, hey, is that a Hilux? Need to investigate that further. This is Tasmania, so that is definitely a Hilux. A Hilux is basically a marginally more capable Tacoma with what they say was just way less refined interiors, but these bad boys look so awesome. I believe that these are actually the 6th gen Hilux that ranged from about 1997 to 2004, kind of coinciding actually with 1st gen Tacomas. But with Toyota, they simultaneously produced the Tacoma for the American market at that time. These bad boys really only had inline 4s, but are absolutely unkillable. Headcanon says that given this is Tasmania, these were the diesel engine, so they could actually go up to the 3 slow. It's called the 3.0, but it's called the 3 slow, although I guess the 3 slow is the gas variant, but they only gave you about 97 horsepower, so I'm fairly certain they were the 3 slow as well. But Toyota's never been about speed and power, it's about longevity, and that's why these things are going to outlive all of us. So Ava and Longhair continue to search buildings together as they enter a nursery store. Ava's apparently having issues get pregnant, and yeah, this is actually like, here's your dose of, I don't know, existential dread. This is getting alarming. Fertility rates are dropping, and we have no idea what the microplastics in the male testicles are doing to our ability to reproduce. Let's go ahead and assume they're also in the actual ovaries of women. I'm not really sure what the female testicles would be. I mean, I guess technically speaking, those are just essentially the ovaries, but not really sure why I had to designate as male testicles. Anyways, we have no idea how this is going to affect our ability to reproduce. We can't even find a sample group of people who don't have microplastics in their balls to see what the effects are. So, ooh, not good. Anyways, man-made horrors well within all of our comprehensions aside, over at the Sugar Boy, a group has formed as a walker is then walking as pops are heard from inside the store. Also, here's a thought. Why not arm the volunteers? I get it's not the US, but if you know these things could be aggressive, which the volunteers don't, I mean, at minimum, your standard handheld should be administered, right? Maybe a minimum, like a machete, a pocket knife. Anything is better than like, pop a flare, the military will be there type of nonsense. Like, oh, while this thing is like totally poking me in the eyes to death, I'm glad I popped my flare so the military can respond in 20 to 25 minutes. Bro! Anyways, entering the next house, nice car by the way, GTS Monero, hey? I'll have to look into that. I haven't actually heard of this. Having looked into it, I wasn't aware of your game, Australia. I respect it. These are basically the Australian muscle cars, which is kind of shocking. I just thought they had all Hilux, Land Cruisers, and Foster beer over there. Of course, you can't have muscle cars and not have American influence, so legitimately, the 327 Chevy engine, as well as the absolutely goated 350 were typically what were used in these bad boys. Can't say I'd 100% go after this body style, but with those engines, I can respect it. The 327 would get you about 210 to 250 horsepower, depending on what sort of carb and tuning you engaged in, and about 10 to 15 miles per gallon. Of course, my Impala, I was getting like 8 miles per gallon, and the 350, ironically, had more of a range, but the high performance could get you up to around 370 horsepower with the LT1 versions, but only about 8 to 12 miles per gallon. Seriously, my Impala, when I got it out of my crackhead's yard, I don't know why I said my crackheads, when I got it out of a crackhead's yard, I am not kidding, down in Georgia, it is a miracle I didn't get shot showing up to go get this thing. This guy had put like a 350 in it from the 1980s to drag race a 4,500 pound vehicle. It was dripping oil like you wouldn't believe while simultaneously burning oil, and it got like 5 miles per gallon. What a time and a half that was getting it out of his yard. And also the 120-pound meth head we recruited from the forest next to his house, who owes him a favor. This whole thing was wild. Anyhow, so as Ava looks around, she spots footprints as someone is standing in the corner looking a little worse for wear. Blown blood vessels in the eye, and the other eye is completely destroyed. As they stand there, the military then shows up and pops him. A woman then prays for everyone, as in the distance, mass pits are dug for everyone there, because really, what else are you supposed to do? Unceremonious as all get out, but you lack a lot of options otherwise. So, looking off in the distance, as a burning plume of smoke arises, Ava has more hallucination flashbacks about her husband. As a treat. And while having those flashbacks, she could use some good music to listen to, I bet. Which is perfect for today's sponsor. But first, this episode is sponsored by Raycon. The bone conduction headphones are here to help you go for gold. Go to buyraycon.com/RoanokeBC to get 15% off. Thanks to Raycon for sponsoring. So I recently started dating, and unfortunately for me, she likes running. I don't mind running, but she has this horrific habit of being able to, talk while running, while I'm just completely sucking wind. Well, I would like to actually hear what she's saying, but also hear my music. That's where the bone conduction headphones come into play. Seeing as they use off-the-ear audio, it sends the sound vibrations directly through my skull, which is pretty metal as all get out, to vibrate my ear bones so that I can hear my music, but also my ears stay open to the world around me. So I can actually hear her telling me how easy this run is, while blood vessels burst in my eyes. I am built for strength, not long distance. But with its 13 hours of battery life and IP68 waterproof design, while I'm being transported to the hospital, I'll have plenty of crystal clear, bass-boosted sound to keep me company during my arduous recovery. So that sounds like something you too are in the market for, probably, the safety aspect of being able to run and also hear your music. I have struggles of my own. Then go to buyraycon.com/RoanokeBC to get 15% off your order today. So that night, Ava decides to say, screw this, I'll walk, as then she maps a course that she needs to take. One problem, though, it's about 200 miles, which is fantastic that she used that measurement. Oh, wait a minute, she's American. Yeah! Bald Eagles and Star Spangled Banner. So grabbing her stuff, everyone is basically partying in the dorms, as one does, as Ava then heads into the kitchen and exits through an open garage. A soldier then asks her, where are you going? And then she's like, I'm just getting some fresh air. Being called a Yank, she's then told to go back inside and party with the rest of the Americans. Hell yeah, brother. Sitting down with long hair, he then pours her a shot as he drinks to what wonders await them tomorrow. Sitting closer to him, she then tells him she's looking for her husband. Ava then brings up how that man in the garage didn't look fully gone. Well, maybe. She hopes her husband is like that, which is fairly unlikely. She says goodnight, as he says he will see her tomorrow, partner, bright and early for the continue process of looking through houses. Entering some home, she then hears scratching as Broham comes charging around the corner. Waking up, that one city is obviously still on fire, and I hate to ruin this for you, but ironically, that dream literally accounts for 50% of the attacks in this movie. A dream. Australians making zombie movies appear to be more of a focus on the survivors and their struggles internally sort of deal, rather than the actual fight for your survival kind of deal, it seems. Heading to the garage, they find the motorcycle as they open the plastic wrap in the back and find there was a bachelor party of some sort going on here, maybe, probably, or frat party. Really bit hard to know which is which. As they talk, oh god, the stripper's waking up. Ava then talks about the route down to the land of burning fun, as Longhair agrees to go with her, as Ava then looks up and sees the stripper is moving around, and it's kind of creepy, to be honest with you. Going to look at her, she is grinding her teeth. Okay, so this is like actual me and not YouTube me having a breakdown here. This rustles my jimmies so bad. The teeth thing, You know when you like click them accidentally and then you stand there, you're like, gah! That's me. The whole movie. Even now, just thinking about it. So because this causes me pain that I must go through in order to deal with this, I want you to leave a like. That would be most good. And if you do enjoy the content, please subscribe, as it does nothing because YouTube changed the rules. So who really cares? You can imagine, okay, I'm trying to like relate to the audience. You guys obviously are the audience. You know, like nails on the chalkboard, or like paper cuts underneath your fingernails, or paper cuts in between the webbing of your fingers. That feeling. That's what I feel. Ugh. Anyway, so Ava talks to her as she turns and then looks at her. Yes, that is in fact a brain reacting to stimulus. Could be not ideal, could be a recovering brain. Gonna have to figure that one out. So Longhair and Ava then grab helmets and the bike and then start moving south with Longhair basically inebriated driving. Very good. Moving in and out of stopped vehicles, it appears all life in the area was in fact annihilated. Also, you know the nails on the chalk, that seriously, the squeamish feeling, grinding teeth, ooh. So the noise literally makes my stomach turn. I'm sitting here grossed out. Yeesh. Okay, moving on. I know I'm rehashing a bit, but it's just nice to talk about it. So while trying to think about that sound, oh good, the military is rolling down the road. Hiding behind a car and with no idea how they didn't get spotted in the first place because that's not how human eyes work, a man approaches them, missing an arm, as the military just completely domes him. The only reason they survived is because they were behind a goated 6-gen Hilux. Also, she hallucinates that was her husband being domed, but that's not as important as the Hilux that they are sitting at. In fact, you know what? Start that bad boy up because the keys are probably in it. And even if it wrecked, I bet you that thing still runs. So getting to the town, it appears as though it's all smoke and dust, as one body then drags itself across the road, which I won't lie to you. This is a lot like the zombie head in the cooler at the end of Dawn of the Dead that I forgot about during that episode. Well, how are they alive? Well, it's important to remember that this was just a brain shutdown, not a metabolism-altering infection. I can only assume then that this must have happened recently, or a fire has completely cauterized many of the vessels in the lower body, with the abdominal aorta also being one of them. Otherwise, this person would technically have no ability to be alive, just... like, it only diminishes neural capacity if they come back online. It's not changing their metabolism. Anyway, so the epicenter seems maybe a little worse, and continuing their trek, they appear way off course, having to now use oxygen to filter the air, as everything down in the valley is burning crazy style. Skirting around it and heading into Baker's Fuel and food. Oh, there's a sleeping person out front. Again, no need to worry, YouTube mods. Finding water, they drink up Johnny, as they are now 19 miles outside of the city. Grabbing some food, Ava helps Longhair with his stiff shoulder. She's a physical therapist, and her husband apparently was in renewable energy. Longhair was a builder in Melbourne, and as they talk, someone morphs in the background, foot broken. Telling him they're closed. Oh god, he does the teeth thing, as a soldier then domes him before he can attack. This movie is activating my almonds so badly. Stop doing the teeth thing, for the love of God. But the soldier then takes him out fully. The soldier says there's a pattern. The longer they go, the more they lash out. Yes, it's almost like areas of the brain are recovering and kind of reigniting, which is absolutely horrific considering what the military is doing. Like, okay, there's a very clear pattern emerging here. It's brainstem and then further out. So, yeah, we'll talk about that. He then asks them what they were doing there, as she's like, oh, we're just here to find my husband and we're on body retrieval. The soldier's like, you guys aren't supposed to be down here, as he tells them to come along with him, as Longhair is then put in handcuffs and Ava is isolated in a bathroom. Anti-vibing in there, she then apologizes to her husband, as it's nothing but looking at your wedding ring in the bathtub and disgruntled husbands coming home to a wife that vaguely texts that they need to talk at like 9:48 a.m. So you get to think about the whole day while you're at work. All I'm saying is, if you need to talk to your partner, right, give them at least an inkling of what you intend to talk about, along with the fact that you need to talk. If you leave them in the dark, you are 100% a total douche. That's right. I'll die on that hill. It's drama for the sake of drama, and limiting information to put your spouse in emotional turmoil makes you an asshat. Also, it does turn out Ava is, in fact, an asshat, and we will come to find this information out. So, back in the bathroom, the soldier then comes back to tell her, oh, right bloke you got there, he did a runner and bailed out. That's what he sounds like. I mean, he wasn't a right bloke for her. He was just a random dude. Anyways, he says if he does find him, he will throw the book at him at a volunteer. So big man over here, whoa, he informs her that if they find her husband, she needs to be aware of what that might mean. Also, Bro was married as well, and jumping in the vehicle, they begin their drive to where she's pretty sure her husband is supposed to be. Asking how much further, he says almost there, but pulling up to the Bluebird bed and breakfast, holy alliteration, they're headed there because apparently there's some meat in the freezer that he needs to grab. So, lone dude, know there's soldiers in this area? Once again, a bit strange, isn't it? Is that British or Australian, I can't tell. More like, oi, bloke, throw another shrimp on the bobby. He says he's a half-decent cook and he's running on fumes as they go to eat. Also, if any of you Australians still stuck around after that, you can be my friend. Yes, but did Longhair actually do a runner or was he taken out? Inquiring minds once more wish to know. Telling Ava about his old man, he was apparently there when the US started playing around with that pulse tech that took everyone out down here. He tells Ava about his wife Katie and how they were expecting an offspring. She was down in Queensland and he was sent up north. But he himself was down there to find his wife and it appears to be pretty much AWOL at this point. He says he found his wife all sitting around the kitchen table with her family and she was donezo. Bro is debriefing hardcore right now and he's having difficulty with how the rug was pulled out and he never got a chance to say goodbye. Yeah, that part's a bit rough, but that's actually way more common than like the slow goodbye he's mentioned. He's like, you should, have like a terminal illness and it should take a while. That's not necessarily true, man. A lot of people just kind of like leave one day, totally normal routine, and then they just never come back. The family isn't expecting anything different, the friends aren't expecting anything different, the spouse isn't expecting anything different, and it just happens. That's why you always tell your loved ones whenever they go anywhere, no matter how mad you are at them, that you love and care about them. So Ava then goes to her room, pretty much assured there's no way her husband survived, as then she pops on a dress because she did make a deal with a soldier, as well as shoes, and perfume, and a necklace, about dancing with them. But she does one critical issue. She leaves the ring off. Alrighty then. So grabbing a knife, however, he then enters the room, as apparently Bro, again, asked for one dance with her. Nah, yes, dancing with someone stiff as a board, who's totally not into this. Very good. Listening to music, she imagines dancing with her husband, as he apologizes to Katie, but using Ava as the avatar, I suppose, and seemingly Ava was pregnant by her husband, allegedly, as the soldier says she's not wearing it. The ring isn't being worn, as he starts crashing out saying, "You ruined it!" He asks her to put the ring on. Brother, you are being a total weirdo right now, I ain't gonna lie. She says she played her part, but she needs to put the ring on, or apparently the deal's over. So she smashes him in the face with a lamp, and then runs. She now finds Katie on the bed, as he says some come back from unfinished business. He bases that on absolutely nothing. It actually has more to do with the brain. He then says his offspring is alive, as he felt him kick. Very doubtful, my man, but we shall see. Jumping out the window and noping out of there, she then re-enters the house in order to grab the keys. Coming through the door, she gets caught and then takes off to the barn. Hiding in there from Creepy McCreepster, there are a ton of patrons tied up, and apparently Bro has been observing them as, oh god, they start doing the teeth thing again. So taking off her ring, he then tells her to come up with him, as she says she can't find her ring. Has he seen it? She says they can finish their dance now, as he approaches her as he kind of backs. He kind of approaches her, but she starts approaching him with malicious intent. So he backs up. She says she can patch him up, as he has a nice cry and then hugs her. Grabbing the knife from her back, he then says she already ruined it, it's too late, as then she just straight up stabs him in the carotid. That's one way to do it. Grabbing the keys, Bro's then left behind as she takes off in the truck, as oh god, Katie is outside standing there. So maybe the offspring is alive, I don't know. So leaving the family farm, she then drives into the morning and has flashbacks to Mitch packing. She tells him to stay, but he doesn't think that's a good idea. So he leaves for Tasmania, and waking up the next morning in the truck, she puts back on her ring and gets out to start her nice jaunt once more. Seemingly having run out of fuel, she's only 40 miles from Woodbridge, as in the water, a plane is wrecked. Stuff has been left out on the beach, and cars are absolutely donezo. But you know what those cars have in them? Fuel. Siphon some of it, I don't know. Do something. Anyways, so she walks, the guy then appears doing the teeth thing as he approaches her, slowly stepping on some glass. Giving chase, he runs after her, as then she runs into the bus to escape and then smacks him in the head with something, taking him out. Ouchies. However, it was only a knockout, as then she goes kind of for the double tap, because he tries to go after her again, and she's forced to smack him in the head a few more times to finish the job. Getting out and continuing her jaunt, she has made it to a camper with a ton of mail out front. Don't know why there's that much mail out front. It's not like the family was done inside and they were still delivering mail. Anyway, so finding the meat suits of the family left behind, she then brings them outside as she checks the blisters on her feet. Ouchies. She's only 6 miles away from her husband at this point, so, pretty close, but she doesn't want to walk at night. Going to sleep with an axe, she then sees a guy come to as she hears something outside. Going to check what that is, rattling noises continue as someone is walking around the camper. Not ideal. A person is out front digging, as then he turns around and looks at her. Woody Harrelson is digging for some reason, as he turns around, continue to look at her, but actually, you know what? He isn't all that interested. She watches him, as this is some fairly complex brain activity, so she helps him bury his family, as then she checks his license. Hallucinating her husband again, he looks at her before looking down at his family. To me, this is just certain areas of the brain coming back online even further out. Well, we will never know, as then she ends this man's whole career and then finishes burying him, which I'm pretty sure at this point constitutes as a murder. It is now the next morning as she has arrived at Enso, an all-inclusive resort. There is no way her husband is alive. Everything in this area was annihilated. Unless this guy has like a super special brainstem, he's done. So looking at the yoga class that was happening as everyone was dropped, that sucks. The last thing you did was yoga? Rough shake. One woman is snarling at the glass, doing the teeth thing, as she continues walking through. Actually, fun fact, the more I hear it, the less nervous system activation I get out of it. Exposure therapy, I suppose. Now, if I could only do that with a plane. In fact, I ran into a test pilot, you may be watching this, at the gym the other day. Thanks for watching, bro. I don't know how you do test pilot stuff. That sounds horrifying. So entering one room of the do not disturb area, she finds a guy by the bed. Kneeling down next to him, she has found her husband, who in no way has survived this entire thing. Grabbing his hand, the smell's got to be atrocious. Checking through his things, she finds that a woman was in the room with him, and his wedding ring was off. She asks if he has any unfinished business. She says, right there, you're just going to sit there and you're going to leave this mess the way it was. She then tells him to wake up, but man, exposure alone would have gotten this guy, even if his brainstem was working, like even inside. So hearing Longhair call out to her, he then finds her with her husband. So she gives us the lowdown. Basically, she wanted to start IVF. He said they just needed to give it a little bit more time, but she didn't like that. So the next logical conclusion, as we would all say, at least in her mind, is to cheat on her husband.
What? No, I know that sounds bad.
How that tracks? Well, I'm sure I will never know, but the whole we need to talk is actually her divulging that she is the wrong partner to choose long-term, apparently. All right, lady. So, totally pound sand on that one. This was your mess. We need to clean up our mess? I like how she's including him, like this was his mess as well. I don't know if you're picking this up, but disloyalty absolutely disgusts me. So as Amy keeps telling Longhair the story about what a turd in the punch bowl she is, she assumed if she could just find him, she could fix it. Nah, Amy. Those are what we like to call consequences for your actions, so you can suck it. So they drink on the beach as Longhair then talks about how his daughter and mother basically thought he was kind of a douche, to be completely honest. And he kind of did this to show them that he was selfless. Apparently, they told him to screw himself anyways. And then drinking and looking out, Longhair then asks how she escaped that psycho at the beginning. Which, now that all bonds are broken, it's montage time of Longhair and Amy doing random stuff at the resort. Of course, the bonds were already broken, and she already did this with somebody else. So, muscle memory. Anyways, so hanging out at the pool and taking out the changed, Amy then has to take one out, which apparently ruins the vibe. The next morning, they barricaded the door and then hit the hay together. Hangover has got to be absolutely wild. Looking at a painting, Amy then messes with her ring before walking down the hallway and heading to her husband's room, dropping off her ring. Wrapping him up, Longhair then accidentally throws up on her husband. The hangover is brutal, and then they put him in the boat and send him out to sea on the burning vessel. Grabbing a car next, and then past the bed and breakfast and continue returning back to home base. My God, a 60 Series Land Cruiser. Amazing. Once again, not the strongest or fastest vehicle on the planet, but they typically came with a 4.2 inline 6. Actually, funnily enough, the LX450 I just sold basically has the engine that was meant for a forklift. That's why they leak oil like you wouldn't believe, as I don't believe they were made for actual cars. Toyota just ended up getting crafty with it. So coming to a stop, Katie is in the road and it appears as though she's given birth. She's doing the teeth thing, so thank God she goes away. And looking out, Katie then turns and starts walking in the other direction, and they can hear crying in the distance. Running over to the youngling, the baby appears to be covered in SpaghettiOs, but is quite normal. Wrapping up the youngling, it stops crying as she has now acquired an offspring, which means had Soldier Boy just chilled out, he could have actually had his offspring, but he had to be a total weirdo, and now he can't. Thus concludes We Bury the Dead. Hello and welcome to the science portion, nerd! Actually, thanks for watching this bit of the video. It helps the videos tremendously and allows me to very slightly skirt around the film review channel allegations. Hell yeah. Alright, so I think first and foremost, we should probably set up the actual event here before discussing why it was so effective at shutting down the brain almost instantly, because much like I did, I bet you're sitting there asking, how? Which, as always, it's a movie, so it could be a multitude of things, but there is, at least from my reckoning, a few ways in which this could possibly go down and make it a reality. And then we will discuss the brain coming back online and how it may be possible for some, but not others. Alright, so let's start from the beginning. A bright light and your brain's inability to fight. To understand what is taking place here, you need to actually go down to a neuronal level inside of the brain, but even to that end, there are varying differences in which resiliency of neurons can be displayed. So let's begin with the cerebrum of man. In this area, which is the furthest area out, you can kind of think of it like the parietal and frontal lobes. This is said to basically be what houses our humanity. This is the area that separates us from all the other animals for the most part and is delicate as all get out. When functioning normally, you will actually have dendrites reaching out to the axon terminal of the previous neuron. As the first neuron fires, neurotransmitters are sent out to reach the next dendrite. These dendrites are basically feelers that can be communicated to, which are part of the neuron cell body. That's right, we're getting into like the actual, the breakdown. Pull out your charts. We're going to talk about neurons. So as the information is interpreted, basically enough of the neurotransmitters must be present in order to induce a firing. And this is the crux of the entire system right here. Whether the neuron fires or not is dependent upon how many neurotransmitters make it to the receptors. And this is actually the dangers of using substances. To make it as simplistic as possible for brevity's sake, let's say you have 3 dopamine and 3 receptors. As they fire, this system is perfectly balanced. However, let's say now you imbibe a substance, which I'm not going to blame you for it or be like, I'm holier than thou. I had tequila last night. So now you release 9 dopamine for 3 receptors. At first, this flood of dopamine feels amazing and sticks around in the synaptic gap longer than normal, making you feel awesome for the duration that it is there. Over time, as you imbibe this substance more and more, however, your brain will begin making more receptors in order to deal with the excess dopamine. You now only release 9 dopamine for 9 receptors. So because of this, to have the same effects, you have to imbibe more of the substance to feel normal because, in a sense, this is reality. Over time, you take in more of the substance, raising it to 18 dopamine to feel good again. Your neurons create more receptors, and now you have 18 receptors. This is fundamentally how you become tolerant of substances. However, one day you wake up and realize you're ruining your life because the substances you've been imbibing are 14 Big Macs a day. So you decide, you know what, I'm going to stop. Knowing your baseline is 3 dopamine and this is going to blow, you go cold turkey and start eating regular turkey sandwiches. The issue isn't that your brain is not creating any more dopamine. You just simply don't have enough to activate 18 receptors to let the neurons know to keep firing as normal. Along with this, because of the excess dopamine released, you have exhausted your reserves on the previous neuron. And so, you are now releasing 1 dopamine for 18 receptors. Hardly anything at all, and certainly will not cause the next neuron to fire. This is effectively known as withdrawal. Your brain's operational baseline has been completely disrupted and shifted. And so, you feel like absolute crap. Like brain on fire crap, baby on the ceiling with the head turning, vomiting, horrific anxiety, paranoia, all the fun things in life. However, there is some good news, and it's called neuroplasticity, and this will be important later. Essentially, those transmitters, if not being used, will be broken down over the course of about 90 days, and that will be your brain returning to its normal baseline. Along with this, the former neuron will recover and not have its dopamine reserves exhausted, and so it will return back to releasing 3 dopamine for 3 receptors. However, again, those 90 days will absolutely blow. And this is also kind of what creates a overdose situation with people who may not be eating 14 Big Macs anymore. They're like, well, last I left off, I could eat 14 Big Macs instead of just the one, so I'm going to do it again, and then that ends up taking them out. But why did I tell you any of this? Because even with a neuron becoming completely disjointed, the fact is, as long as oxygen is being provided and the cell is still alive, it can recover. So as a signal is sent down the axon, it's important to understand there needs to be a gradient established. At first, you have the resting state with 3 main ingredients. Sodium will want to enter the cell, potassium wants to exit the cell, and calcium triggers the actual neurotransmitter release. Got it? Good. Excellent. It'll be on the test later. So as the resting state is, as it implies, it's resting. The inside of the neuron is about negative 70 millivolts with an ion gradient actively being maintained by the ATP pump. Remember, Mason, the ATP pump. This maintains the gradient. As the signal comes in, that 3 dopamine just hit the second dendrite and triggers the depolarization event, the sodium channels open up, allowing sodium to rush into the cell as the outside is hypertonic and the inside is hypotonic. And it's not just dopamine, I just said that. It's a neurotransmitter. But this means the solute naturally wants to go where there is less of itself. The voltage now spikes, sending the signal down the axon. Insulation around the axon, known as the myelin sheath, will actually help speed up the firing. Past this point, the repolarization event happens, which causes the sodium channels to close and the potassium channels to open, which then causes the neurons to reset. And from here, you enter what is known as a refractory period. For partners, it's typically around 15 minutes, unless you're popping blue chews every 14 seconds. For your neurons, it takes just as long as the reset period, like for the gradient just to be established, which is not very long at all. Now, what may be odd to you based on all this information is it appears as though the brain has it down pretty good, correct? Close some channels, open others when feasible, and then establish a gradient to keep the information moving along, right? Well, yes, that is in fact what is taking place here, but what's also important to remember is it's all based on physics. See, that's what's so weird when you really get down to like the smallest operations of us. It's just based on movement of literal atoms interacting in a way that they would have already naturally interacted, and that's it. That's us. That's all of life. If for some reason something were to change this fundamental aspect, the entire system falls apart. Pretty crazy to think about that that's what we are based on. But existential dread aside, let's examine the pulse technology real quick. First off, the name itself, pulse technology. That's what the soldier was mentioning about his old man being a part of concerning its creation. And with that, we can assume it wasn't just one gigantic blast, but actually a pulsating field that would actually be the consequence that we would have seen. So let's assume then that there was an oscillation of energy released after the initial wave hit. This is where the danger actually lies rather than with just an EMP blast itself, mainly because an EMP doesn't really affect a normal human brain. The only way it would really have any impact in today's current technological levels is by disrupting maybe pacemakers or even just cochlear implants, because in reality we don't have chips being implanted in the brains all that often as of right now. Give it another 50 years or so and that may be totally different. In fact, I don't know, dude, people could be watching this 50 years in the future. I have no clue. Maybe it's just like, oh, they were so archaic back then. I'll be 80. Oh my God, I'll be 84, technically, in 50 years. I could still be alive. It's just not likely. Anyways, so EMP blast from nukes or in specialized equipment is essentially designed to affect machines first and foremost. So one must ask, why has Super Earth not completely EMP blasted Cyberstan yet so I can actually not get blown to pieces by Vox engines? It's a conspiracy against me to raise my blood pressure. Anyways, go liberate Starkfield on Cyberstan. It's the only way for us to get to Transcendence before we run out of reinforcements, you giant dorks. If you are bug diving, I don't know, come help or something. Anyhow, so an EMP blast actually induces a current in electronics specifically because of the long wires and circuits that it has. This ends up damaging the equipment, completely shutting down the machine in that process. This is also hilariously why if we get a strong enough solar storm from the sun, like the one in the 1800s where the sun literally sent people telegraphs and then zapped anybody who touched the telegraph machine, our power grid is totally boned, like entirely. Best part is we have no clue when that could even happen. We should probably also worry about AI, but we also need to worry about the giant orb in the sky above us as well. It's plotting on humanity's downfall and has been doing so since the drop. So EMPs work really well in these wires, but the main issue with humanity or cats is our brains do not work like actual machines, and it doesn't even work on orange cats at all. These gradients are widespread, and cells may be initially, maybe extremely mildly affected by an EMP blast. Think of it like, huh, well, that felt weird. But even the strongest EMP blast that we can produce right now still wouldn't disrupt our brain's firing. In fact, let's examine it through the lens of a magnetic field being produced, because that would be the thing that would have the most impact. The absolute unit of a magnetic field it would take would be so exceedingly damaging that people would have got just by the metals in their homes. Currently, we can alter brain function to a degree by placing super powerful magnets near the brains of people, which can affect the voltage, but this is an extremely localized event, and if you accidentally drop the magnet and it attaches to another one, well, you're totally screwed because you aren't uncoupling those. A magnetic field release of this size would basically suck in any piece of metal, cars, homes, metal boomerangs, whatever. It would all move towards the blast, but we can see none of that. Instead, what we do see is a blast and then people dropping. And apart from the initial compressional wave caused by it actually exploding, there's not really all that much damage except for like the complete epicenter. So here's how I believe the blast is taking place. Remember in Gears of War when you detonate the resonator and then several pulses are sent out, giving everyone the trademarked Roanoke ringing in the ears? I have no idea why I'm trying to claim that. I'm pretty sure everyone in the military already has that. Not service related though, guys. Tough break. So let's assume then it's like a pulse like that moving through the body in the brain. Well, what could it be doing? Well, seemingly, I think it's electrical, which causes the brain to actually depolarize, but this wouldn't be enough. It also requires the actual movement of tissue within the brain, but not to a level that would really damage the neuronal connections outright, but enough to potentially raise the internal temperature by just a few degrees. Remember, microwaves vibrate, actual water molecules, and that's how it heats up. So movement actually heats things up. It's just not to a level of cooking, but enough to cause a complete cascade of consequences for the brain that in turn would shut everything down. First, I think it's important for me to tell you oscillation, again, can increase internal temperature. I'm not really sure why I reiterated that twice, but it's not going to be by a ton, but I think we see evidence of it, believe it or not. So when we look at the afflicted, it's not that they are some cannibalistic monster who's been reanimated. They show very real signs of essentially what is microtrauma. The tiny blood vessels in the eyes have been burst, which is the most telling event. In the skin, there are also maybe some burst blood vessels, but not large ones, but very, very fine, like finely tuned and developed smaller ones, also known as capillaries, or if you're British for some reason, capillaries. And not if you're British for some reason. You're British, unfortunately, but for some reason you say it's capillaries. Anyways, the larger ones could very likely stand up to the oscillation, but the small ones, with the expanding and the contracting of smaller tissues, this pulls on the vessels, bursting them. In reference to the brain, this small movement isn't enough to destroy the brain. If it was, I mean, man, we would just be totally screwed by like going for a run, or like a concussion would be an absolute death sentence. Also, if you just heard my phone ring, my girlfriend is texting me, and my phone just dropped. Anyways, it doesn't really matter, but if you just even moved, it would be a death sentence for your brain if this was really that issue. However, it does have an extremely localized impact on the neurons themselves. This oscillation of an electromagnetic field in one blast does nothing, but as waves of it move through the brain, this would hit a specific frequency within the brain, which would likely cause a mass depolarization event that in turn would cause a very, very forceful, quick seizure. Now, this seizure would not be like the fall down and shake seizure. Instead, it would just be one jolt and your body would lock up and you would fall where you are. Think of it like freezing in place as everything contracts at once. So whatever you were doing at that specific point in time, you are now stuck that way if you were like in child's pose, for instance, or if you were holding a hose out back or just sleeping. Now, typically, your brain likes to be alive, so even after this type of seizure, usually your brain could recalibrate and establish a gradient again so that it could fire. But this is where the next issue would arise that would be completely stopping the process from happening that results in this shutdown. And this is affectionately known as a calcium death cascade. Sounds fun, doesn't it? Well, it is. As this oscillation happens, it would depolarize the brain all at once, raising the temperature within the brain just a few degrees, as very likely this signal would then bounce around your skull, since sometimes the skull can actually act as somewhat of a Faraday cage. It is at this point something critical happens. The voltage-gated calcium channels would stay open. Because of this, the NMDA glutamate receptors remain functional, which is horrific for your brain's longevity. This allows for calcium to enter the neuron at an unprecedented rate. For reference, your neurons will microdose on calcium as a treat from time to time, but levels are kept 10,000 times lower in the cell as opposed to the outside. This gradient difference means it is an ultra super mega happy fun time hypertonic solution outside of the cell and incredibly hypotonic within the cell. This is literally the old man outside the window screaming at the solution on the inside of the cell about how you are mine all the time. And this is its chance to make it mine. But I can hear you asking, well, Roanoke, why is it kept so low? Because it actually triggers a lot within the neuron, so you don't want a lot of this stuff. It'll activate things like proteases to cut proteins, phospholipase to actually destroy the membrane. It'll stress the hell out of the mitochondria by disruption of ATP production, and eventually it will induce apoptosis, which is basically your cell being like, it's been real, it's been fun, it has been real fun, and then it just kind of explodes itself. Calcium is great for bones, horrific for neurons. And speaking of metabolism, that's the next issue to discuss. As the gates are open, calcium then rushes into the cell, which immediately disrupts the mitochondrial membrane potential that it itself has, which again is based on charges. As a result, ATP within the neuron can no longer be produced, which, remember, that's what operates the other voltage channels, which if you remember that, you're correct. ATP is quite important. So sodium and potassium are no longer being regulated. Because of this, the neuron, after being depolarized, now enters what would usually be the refractory period, and this is where it gets stuck. A gradient is never reestablished. The electrical machinery of the brain is stuck in this depolarized state, which means, yeah, you're totally boned. It is at this point, you have about 5 to 6 minutes before permanent cell death starts to creep in, and this is because, assumedly, your heart is stopping also. However, during this point in time, it's important to remember a couple of things. First, you would drop, so some injuries would be sustained during the falling of yourself. Second, the brainstem is more resilient than the rest of the brain. And third, the lymphatic system, if restarted, may be able to help somewhat, which actually could be what we were seeing. So let's examine all of these possibilities. If you drop and get past the 6 minutes, and your heart's not pumping and you have no oxygen going to anywhere, you're done. Game over, man. Game over. However, clearly there are those who get back up. Well, what does this tell us? Well, this goes back to the concept of agonal breathing. What is that? Glad you asked. Do you know what a death rattle is? Basically, it's when breathing isn't regulated or normal and usually indicates that higher functioning of the areas of the brain are already gone. So you're essentially a vegetable. However, your brain, and specifically your brainstem, isn't usually one to give up the fight that easily. Looking at the brain, you have 3 areas that are in order of development over the last 1.3 billions of years, so to speak, basically expanding outwards. It begins with the brainstem, which was the most basic component. The functionality here is basically the body agreeing it needed something to run the autonomic functions of the body. So rather than just having it sporadically all over, this one centralized area would actually run these functions. This has not changed in humanity. Heartbeat, sleeping paralysis, breathing are all continued through the brainstem, which means now you're manually breathing, which means I affected your brainstem. Ha! Anyways, next is going to be like the pons and medulla and the midbrain developed, which those are going to add some complexity to the animal. These are referred to as the lizard brain portions, and they are quite old structures. Now, it's not exactly that's your lizard brain, it's just they're old. They're also harder to kill, but easier than the brainstem itself, and it continues on throughout the primate area of the brain, and then to the human part, which is the cerebrum, which is largely voluntary and associated with more complex thought, which is basically why you're manually breathing, because it's kind of like your voluntary area competing with the autonomic area. Yeah, it's all very fun. Anyways, I'm also manually breathing, so it's both of us. These neurons are easier to take out with oxygen deprivation. Agonal breathing is the sharp, disorganized breath that someone takes in near death. Basically, the brainstem is registering higher CO2 levels than normal by detecting pH levels in the brain. In reality, it has no idea how much O2 you have. It's just based on CO2. So now you know. It doesn't really have any other parts of the brain in its line of sights, I guess the best way to put it. It doesn't know if it's dead or not, and it just knows it's running out of O2 because CO2 is rising. The thinking is that the brainstem neurons simply maybe have more ATP reserves than any other neurons, given the necessity of its job and how this is a much older part of the brain and probably is also more robust. So what does this mean for those that drop? It's clear there are 2 categories of people, the alpha chads and the regular people. For one reason or another, as is standard with life, there are differences in biochemistry that are not typically measured, as there is no deviation from normal, but under very specific circumstances, they may come out to play. Sort of like the Delta 32 allele mutation, making Central Europeans able to survive the bubonic plague and subsequently become HIV resistant and immune later, or double bone density, allowing for a person to actually be bone break resistant. You'd never notice it unless you were looking for it or had it tested. In those that survive, they may have a very specific revealing situation happening that they have more ATP in their brainstem than normal. So here's how I see this going down. In those that wake up, whereas others had their hearts stop due to the disruption, whether by brainstem perseverance or maybe the hearts just remain beating regardless, which is known to happen even if the brainstem is cut off, there's an oscillation that would stop eventually. Like the resonance frequency that was sent out would come to an end. So their hearts just managed to keep beating during this event. This let them continue past their 6-minute mark as their hearts kept supplying oxygen, whereas others had their brains shut off and their hearts stopped. This pretty much killed them. But this left a small subsect of the population still somewhat viable. Now from here, there were even smaller outcomes. Brain damage is very clearly present to varying degrees, and in some of the brain damaged people from the calcium overload causing apoptosis, this would leave people in a delusional and vegetative state, much like the guy standing in the garage. And this would likely mean in reality, this person was only brainstem viable. No aggression, just a body running off the most basic components. Others, however, would fare much more differently. The stripper, for instance, goes beyond brainstem and actually shows temporal activation in the presence of sound when responding to Ava. And the father also shows the limbic system was quite active as memory was present, but also decision-making ability as he dug a grave for his family. And this shows the frontal lobe was coming back online. The guy who attacked Ava clearly shows the amygdala was activated and functional, at least to a degree, increasing the aggression, which this part is important to what the soldier mentioned. As stated, the longer a person survived the blast and was up and moving, the more aggressive they become. Well, why exactly? Well, it's clear the lower portions of the brain may be more resilient and come online first, but there's also another thing that's going on. If you look at like the teeth thing, which grosses me the hell out, this is basically bruxism, right? Except a really extreme version of it. And this is typically caused, like you see these in people who use substances, for instance. The dopamine system and the serotonin system are messed up, which cause them to kind of grit their teeth, crunch them, move their jaws, completely, I guess, without voluntary control. It's just kind of done because the neurotransmitters in the brain are not being supplied the right amount of dopamine and serotonin, which definitely means those systems have become affected. But anyways, the other part of having lower dopamine and serotonin, aggression. So this is the aforementioned amygdala issue, coupled with likely also the hypothalamus responding to the lack of nutrition that they have received, as also ghrelin is being produced by the stomach to indicate hunger. Typically, the frontal lobe would mitigate this issue and refine the message to, oh, I don't know, maybe eat a sandwich or something, but potentially this may cause wires to get crossed, so now you're eating a manwich, although to be honest with you, this wasn't seen at all. If anything, the afflicted are just aggressive, as is standard with brain damage, low dopamine and serotonin levels, and not really the frontal lobe kind of intervening in this process. So we don't really know if they're craving man meat or not, phrasing. However, this does raise an interesting thought. Given the fact that the soldier noted that the longer they were up, the more they would start to come to with aggression showing up first, does this mean they actually would return to be somewhat normal? Well, it's doubtful, at least to the extent of their original life, which, you know what? I'm launching into it. Conspiracy time. The government knew this was a possibility, and that is why they were so quick to snub these people out who may be up and walking around. If someone was injured by this event, and they were to fully come back online, or enough to basically become aware, and they were still injured, the lawsuits against the government would go absolutely crazy style, and upper leadership would actually very clearly face consequences. And so the entire process is being rushed intentionally. It's easier to pay out settlements to families who lost loved ones because they are going to be way less to pay off than those actually connected to the situation and affected by it. Most of the families that were dropped were entire families, and so there was no one left to pay. Letting anyone up and surviving means consequences. So the aggressive stance taken is actually to eliminate those loose ends. Pretty messed up, but well within the line of thinking, because if you think the government wouldn't do it, you're an idiot. And finally, what about the offspring at the end? Again, this is clear that these people who get back up, they are still alive. They're not zombified or anything like that. Instead, Katie's body at the end was able to stay alive, which by extension, this means her offspring was still supplied oxygen and kept alive itself. Because of this, how could the brain recover? Well, survival means healing somewhat, and if neurons are lost in this event due to apoptosis, they're never going to be the same, but the main goal is continued activation of the glymphatic system, and this is the waste removal system of the brain. It's clear the intracellular fluid of the brain would be absolutely inundated with materials like that are cytotoxic, but as the days pass and the glymphatic system works, which is basically just the washing of the brain with cerebral spinal fluid that moves through, it would begin filtering out waste products, removing cytotoxic materials as it is designed to do. Basically, one of the interesting aspects about this is the dementia patients or Alzheimer's. There's a growing study looking into the system, maybe not operating as well as it should in older age. One of the biggest things they've found is potentially using ultrasound technology could cause it to restart more effectively because of the mechanical pressures it's putting on the brain. It's actually literally vibrating the brain, which, it also appears to activate the glymphatic system. Rhythmic, pulsating movements, which sounds messed up, but running and walking, basically, are shown to help the glymphatic system. So staying mobile even in old age is quite important. Anyhow, in this instance, as the glymphatic system operates, it may be able to restore equilibrium to the brain, and so many surviving neurons, or at least any of those, would immediately begin reaching out to other surviving neurons, and this is neuroplasticity at work. I'm not saying a person would ever return back to 100% normal, but in the immortalized words of Chubby Emu, they would make a recovery. But anyhow, I want to thank you guys for watching. What are your opinions on what this was? Because it's never actually said. It can't be an EMP blast at all, I don't think, because that doesn't make any sense. But anyhow, if you did enjoy, then please leave a like, as it helps get the video out there. And leave me a comment on what you think. And also subscribe, I guess. Anyways, I'll drop my Twitter, Discord, Instagram, and Roanoke Tales link on the Patreon as well in the description if you want to support the channel. And speaking of patrons, I'd like to thank mine real quick. At the Astronaut tier, we have Kusith and Lipsy Gingy. Thank you guys for your awesome support. At the Astrophysicist tier, we have Death Dancer, Mayura, and Webtron Supreme. Thank you guys as well. At the Scientist tier, we have Frank Shaftcrank, Some Big Nerd, Metros, Try that again. Metric System, Invictus Echo, Official Texan, and the homeless guy on the street, as well as Jason and Gina Elaine. Thank you guys as well. And the rest of my patrons, I really do appreciate y'all's support. You don't even have to help, and you are, so you're absolute ballers. But that's going to do it for me. I hope everyone enjoyed, and I will see y'all in the next one.